Before this video begins, I would like to give a quick thank you to my Asban Team level patrons Fallon Cortez and Nathan Gibson. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. Hello everybody and welcome back to another Doctor Who lore video. Today I wanted to continue in a new series about modern Doctor Who lore and talk about the Cardiff Rift, which was introduced in the Series 1 episode The Unquiet Dead. This is a mysterious time rift in and above the city of Cardiff, monitored by Torchwood 3, and it allows the Doctor to refuel their TARDIS after the destruction of Gallifrey. There's actually a lot of interesting stuff to learn about the Rift thanks to Torchwood and expanded media, so I thought it would be a great idea to do a deep dive of sorts into the lore of this time rift and see just how many secrets it has hidden away. So beware spoilers of all the stories on screen now, and let's get on with it. So what is a time rift? Well, they're described as being a weakness in space and time big enough for people or objects to travel from one place and time to another, even potentially serving as a gateway into another universe entirely. Cardiff had one of these localised entirely within the bay, give or take 5 or so miles, and running through the centre of the city. Although like we see in End of Days, it could expand to cover places around the world like India and Japan. The other end of the rift is not so easy to locate though, with the Torchwood website claiming that the other end is wandering in a seemingly random progression across the universe. It seemed to open all over the universe and could even suck people and objects through against their will. However, it was possible to manipulate the rift and open it on command, like the Weevils who used it to cross over into Cardiff, the Saviour who was an alien slave trader capable of opening the rift to send people to any planet in the universe and any time in the past, and the alien race the Sanctified also learned how to control the rift. These were dinosaur farmers who used to be a warlike race with an empire, and the rift apparently had many openings in their area of the galaxy specifically, but we'll get to them later. The Cardiff Rift wasn't actually that unique because there were loads of other rifts throughout both Earth and the wider universe, like the rift in Coal Hill Academy, which was opened by the Shadowkin and couldn't be properly closed because of all the Artron energy around the school due to things like the Doctor's multiple visits there. According to the book Set Piece, there were also time rifts in ancient Egypt and 1871 Paris, along with the Aberdeen Rift we see in the Eaters of Light. However, the Cardiff Rift was different because of how much more permanent it was, with a lot more foot traffic than those other rifts I just mentioned. Nobody quite knows how long the Cardiff Rift has existed, but according to House of the Dead, Siriath was trapped underneath the rift during the Dark Times before time itself had begun, and before the Earth itself even existed. Siriath was apparently an entity from the oldest universe of all, and almost escaped in 2010. This would have allowed her to use the Dead as a weapon to rip the world apart and possess others, but she was stopped by the ghost of Yanto Jones, and again, more on that later. Also in the distant past, Abaddon, the son of the beast, fought alongside the halogen lifeforms named the Light, who could live in temporal rifts. These two allies fought against Pukum and the Dark. Is Pukum how you say it? I don't know, I guess it's Welsh, and I'm not Welsh, so I'm just going to say Pukum. These two groups were essentially the same, yet opposites of their enemies. You had the Light and then the Dark. It goes without saying, they were quite literally opposites. These two sides fought throughout space and time until they reached the Cardiff Rift and were all imprisoned inside, with Abaddon's existence known to ancient Mesopotamia, who carved a visual of him standing over a powerless city. Abaddon's return was heralded as far back as 1827, with the rift then opening in 1876 Tratari, allowing the demons to fight once more with the help of Bilis Manger and Cathard Manger. Abaddon was seemingly defeated, allowing Pukum and the Dark to take control of the rift for good. But let's backtrack a few years to 1869. During the last Great Time War, the humanoid Gelth were reduced to a gaseous form and lost their home planet, so they travelled through the rift into 1869 Cardiff as we see in The Unquiet Dead. During this episode we also meet Gwyneth, a servant girl who had developed psychic abilities by being so close to the rift. Yes, it was possible for individuals and entire species to develop a level of psychic abilities or time sensitivity by growing up or developing near a time rift like the one in Cardiff. It's also an effect that happened in Pompeii after the power of Vesuvius' eruption opened a brief time rift which echoed back in time and gave some of the population the ability of psychic foresight. The Gelth used Gwyneth's powers to try and open the rift further to allow themselves to invade the planet Earth and take over all the dead. However, they were stopped when Gwyneth closed the rift, although this would only be a temporary solution, as more Gelth would attempt to invade through a rift in Cheltenham Abbey, and the Cardiff Rift itself would increase in activity after December 1869, now that it had been even temporarily opened wider. 10 years after the Gelth incident, the Torchwood Institute was set up by Queen Victoria. Even though Torchwood was mainly based in London, the Queen assigned Agnes Havisham as Torchwood Assessor to watch over the future of the Institute. In 1885, Havisham suggested the creation of Torchwood 3 in Cardiff, based on the threat the rift posed after its activations. It was Torchwood 3's mandate to observe and control the Rift along with dealing with the aftermath of any Rift activity, although any attempts to voyage into the Rift itself were complete failures. This gave Torchwood 3 a nearly 200-year mission of fighting aliens and recovering any artifacts coming through the Rift, to the extent that they were even able to develop a Rift manipulator to control the Rift itself, although only to a limited extent for the majority of Torchwood's existence. However, by 2069, yes, make your silly jokes, Torchwood had managed to control the Rift to the extent that they could send people back through it to another time period. The Rift manipulator was being developed as far back as the 13th of April 1913, and when it was finished, it was hidden inside the Roldal Plus water tower above the Torchwood hub. It could be activated to either open the Rift wider or to stabilize it, or to, drag a TARDIS back home. Although this all tended to have very mixed results, usually causing more issues like releasing all sorts of aliens and monsters, but we'll get to those in a minute. Or, just watch Torchwood. In September 2006, escaped slitheen criminal Blondfell Foch tried creating a nuclear power plant in Cardiff with the hopes of causing a core meltdown on top of the Rift, destroying Earth and allowing her to escape using a space surfboard thing. However, her backup plan was to trick the Doctor into connecting the extrapolator to the TARDIS, which would end up opening the Rift and causing chaos in Cardiff. Despite the Doctor and Captain Jack shutting the Rift back down, it's highly likely that the temporary opening created a host of new activity for Torchwood to have to deal with. Indeed, when Gwen Cooper joined Torchwood, Captain Jack noted how much more active the Rift had recently been. Torchwood had been forced to capture a pterodactyl, and increasing numbers of Cortex leeches were arriving in Cardiff, which were parasitic creatures killing hosts and taking control of their corpses, targeting mainly the homeless, and even killing Torchwood member Sebastian Vaughan. After Gwen joined, the Rift became even more prominent and unstable, with more Weevils coming through, and even a plane from 1953 appearing from the Rift. The Rift's effects on Torchwood culminated when Captain Jack and Toshiko Sato found themselves time shifted into 1941, with Owen Harper being forced to open a rift to bring his teammates back, although this was actually all part of a wider master plan. After his Lord Abaddon had seemingly been defeated, Billis Manger set about planning for the creature's return with the use of a diary. After trying to access the artifacts of the Torchwood archive, Billis used his abilities to walk through time to manipulate the members of Torchwood to open the rift and unleash Abaddon once more, because the demon had actually faked his defeat all those years ago. Indeed, when the rift was opened to protect the Earth, Abaddon attempted to wipe out Cardiff, although he was stopped by Jack Harkness, who allowed the demon to drain his infinite life energy. This left the Light alone in their battle against the Dark and Brookham, with Billis returning to force Torchwood to help the Light due to the threat posed by the now unchecked Brookham. Indeed, Billis showed the Torchwood members an alternate future where the Dark possesses the Torchwood members to capture Jack Harkness and use his immortality to take complete control of the rift and turn Torchwood into the most powerful empire on the planet. This vision of the future forced Torchwood and Billis to work together and imprison the Dark in a wooden box, before sending the Light back down to the rift to imprison Brookham for good. Although Billis would then once again become Torchwood's adversary many times further down the line. In the aftermath of the Abaddon incident, the rift would continue to become more active, something which either caused or was caused by something known as rift storms. A rift storm was a phenomenon seemingly exclusive to the Cardiff Rift that could lead to travel through the rift itself. We see this as Captain John Hart and Gray artificially create rift storms to travel to and from Cardiff and its many different time periods, showing that the rift can be manipulated in the same way as the time vortex itself. Another effect of the rift was its ability to infect beings with its tendrils of energy. Indeed, when insurance worker Paul Talbot was walking home from a night out, he was hit with one of these tendrils, which began to mutate his DNA and turned him into a ravenous cannibal, needing to eat people in order to survive. It turned out that there was no cure or solution to this, so when Paul was captured by Torchwood, he agreed to die peacefully rather than be shot by them. However, this wasn't the only way the rift could destroy the lives of innocent passers-by. As we see in Adrift, the rift was capable of abducting people and items rather than just ejecting them out into Cardiff. Multiple missing people throughout Cardiff's history were victims of this rift activity, although it seemed to be consciously returning them to Cardiff as if to make up for its mistake, even if they came back disfigured or permanently damaged from their journey through the rift, which is just a little bit terrifying that it can just swoop you up and spit you out like that. In 2008, the Sanctified began to believe that the Torchwood Rift Manipulator would be used to destroy their empire, so they created rift storms and sent their Harrow-kind shock troopers to attack Torchwood and the mysterious Vox, who was on the run from the Sanctified. This comic story, Rift War, also introduces the idea of a race named the Shem, who created the Omicron artificial intelligence to explore and map the rift, suggesting that it was a physical dimension that could actually be mapped out in a traditional fashion. Now, when it comes to the closing of the rift, things can get a bit confusing. According to Torchwood creator Russell T Davies, the rift was closed alongside the cracks in time when the 11th Doctor rebooted the universe in the Big Bang. However, the audio drama The House of the Dead tells a different story. This audio sees Captain Jack travel to the most haunted pub in Wales, which was built on top of a crack in the rift. When the psychic Mrs. Wintergreen held a seance, she accidentally summoned Siriath, who could bend time and sent the attendees visions of dead people. This included showing Jack a ghost of Yanto Jones, although this echo then used a giant battery of stored rift energy to destroy the house and Siriath, along with supposedly sealing the rift forever. This was one of the reasons Jack decided to shut down Torchwood 3 after the Children of Earth incident, which had also seen the destruction of the Torchwood hub and the rift manipulator inside it. But the story of the rift doesn't end there. In the late 2010s, former Torchwood agent Gwen Cooper came out of retirement to restart Torchwood 3, using the salvage parts of the rift manipulator to trace space-time holes which seemed to indicate the rift reopening, something confirmed in 2017 when Gwen, Captain Jack and St. John Colchester had rebuilt the hub and the rift manipulator itself due to rift breaches. As chronicled in the Aliens Among Us and God Among Us series, the rift became incredibly active once again, with the villainous Sorvix travelling through the rift and invading Cardiff, along with Billis Manger forcefully opening the rift wide enough to contact the Sorvix god they had been running from and help bring her to Earth. The triple threat of the Sorvix, God and the Committee was an absolute onslaught for Cardiff in the ragtag Torchwood 3, with entities such as the Predator and the Night Sun being unleashed by God to restore the balance of the rift after she resurrected Colchester. Similarly, when the Committee trapped Norton Folgate in a time loop at the edge of the rift to send energy into the Earth's core, God helped Norton free himself, although this caused a tsunami to wreck Cardiff to once again balance things out. This allowed the Committee to install their own rift manipulator in the hub so they could stabilise the rift and travel through it from their home Erebus, although they were stopped by Torchwood 3 leader Yvonne Hartman, who channeled God's powers through the rift and destroyed Erebus entirely, although the status of the rift remains unknown as the Torchwood series continues. The Cardiff Rift is a chilling example of a threat that only Torchwood can deal with. How can our Empire protect a border like the Rift? How can we defend ourselves against an opening into hell, into other worlds and realms of nightmare? How can we ever be safe when unimaginable demons can step through at any moment? These were the words of Queen Victoria in August 1883, and I think it perfectly sums up the intrigue and mystery of the Cardiff Rift. It's a monster in and of itself, able to create and destroy lives without discrimination or any concern for those in its path. It has plagued Cardiff time and time again throughout the city's history within the Doctor Who universe. It cannot be easily controlled, only sometimes being used for good and mainly just causing catastrophes and incidents. On a structural level, it's a brilliant framing device for the city in the Doctor Who universe, and it was a great excuse for the Torchwood spin-off to exist in the first place. It's handled so well in the fiction of the show, really feeling like this mysterious and almost supernatural entity. There's so much about the Rift we still don't know, and that's why I wanted to focus on it in this lore video, because it has had such a huge impact on the show and has led to so many great stories without ever sacrificing the mystery and the wonder of the Rift as this powerful gateway to different times, places and dimensions. So I hope you learned a lot about the Cardiff Rift and hopefully you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye. And a special thank you to my Bansham level patrons Fallon Cortez and Nathan Gibson, my Platinum level patrons Maximilian Foreman and Nick Skames, and all my Gold level patrons Boots, Calvin, Daniel Shillito, Franzorn aka Line Vortex, Herna Verzog, Robert Hock, and Tom Azar. Thank you so much for your support.